I have this favorite story, phenomenal, true story I'd like to share with you. There was this college student by the name of George Danzig. He overslept in his dorm and he was rushing to his math class, and when he entered a math class, it had already started, and he saw on the board, at the corner of the board, that the professor wrote 2 math problems. And so they looked at it, and he was really still not at peace, and his heart was still pumping, and he said, my homework, and so he wrote down those 2 math problems written on the corner of the board. And then the class was dismissed, and he went back to the dorm, and as he started trying to solve those 2 math problems, he said, gosh, this is difficult. So he really tried his best. And you know what? He worked in it for 5 days. For 5 straight days. He just worked and worked and worked for those 2 math problems. And then you know what? At the end of 5 days, he was able to solve them. And so he put it in a nice sheet of paper, and then Friday afternoon, he goes to the faculty room, he looks for his professor, the professor was not there, and so he leaves it on the table of his professor. And then he goes. Guess what happens? Saturday morning, 6 in the morning, he receives a phone call in the dorm. It was the professor. And the professor was almost screaming in the phone. And the professor was saying, George, what have you done? And of course, George was shocked, and he said, why? And the professor says, you solved the 2 math problems. And George says, because it's my homework. Of course I have to solve the 2 math problems. And then the professor explained, And of course, George did not hear the explanation because he was late for math class. The professor explains to George that he was not giving him a homework. When he wrote those 2 math problems at the corner of the blackboard, the professor told the class that these were 2 math problems that for the past 200 years, the greatest mathematicians of the world could not solve. In fact, even the great scientist, Albert Einstein, could not solve these 2 math problems. But the ordinary college student, George, was able to solve. Why? I'll tell you why. Because George did not know that it was impossible. Everyone else thought it was impossible. And when you think in your mind that it's impossible, it's impossible. That will be your reality. Your thinking will prove and will become your reality. George did not know it was impossible. He thought it was homework, and because he had his expectation that the professor will give a homework that he can't solve, he was able to solve it. Friends, there are very few things in this world that are impossible. We totally, completely underestimate our abilities, our powers, our skills. We do. When we think it's impossible, I'll say this again, when you think it's impossible, then it will be impossible. My own experience, when we wanted to publish books for the first time, we wanted to publish books. You know what we did? I printed out 5,000 copies of my books. And then after that, when they run out, I published 10,000 and 15,000 and 20,000. When we were in our printing 20,000 books, I thought and I wonder what number should we reach so that we would become, could be considered a bestseller in the Philippines. So we asked the bookstores, and this is what they told me. And their answer floored me, shocked me. They said, to be a bestseller here in the Philippines, you have to print and sell 2,000 copies. And my jaw dropped, and I said, what? 2,000 copies? If you're able to print 2,000 and sell 2,000 copies, hey, you're a bestseller in the Philippines. That goes to show what a non-reading public we are, Filipinos. But you know what? I thank God that I did not know that fact. Because if I knew, then I probably would have printed 1,000 or 1,500 books. Because I went around, after I learned that, I went around to the printing presses, and people were printing 500 books, 300 books for their titles. Different printing presses of different titles. I didn't know that. So we printed 5,000 and 10,000 and 20,000 books. Thank God I did not know that it was impossible to print 20,000 books. Now some of the titles of our books, of my books, are now 75,000 and 80,000 books per title. Why? Because I did not know it was impossible. I ask you this question, my dear friends. What is that project or that goal in your life that you consider impossible? Is it, to be a certain weight? Is it to start a little business so that you could earn more money? Is it a charitable project? You want to set up an orphanage, or you want to help a depressed area? You might say, that's impossible. To change the political scene of the Philippines, to make the Philippines from a third world country to a first world country, I hear the chorus from your friends and from your neighbors. That's impossible. Well, that's impossible if you think it's impossible. In my mind, in my heart, and according to this television show, Tara na Pinoy, it's not impossible. Let's go. Let's create new things because that's what we believe in.